And tonight, we have a faithful member of New Life Church who's going to come and share his testimony tonight. He's actually a part of a ministry here in Cherokee County called God's Warriors. You familiar with God's Warriors? So they go into the schools, they go into men's recovery homes, and they will end up sharing the gospel with these students, but also lifting like extremely heavy weights. And I'm so excited to have Chad come and share tonight. He serves on our parking team here at New Life every other Sunday, and we're so grateful that he's going to come and share. Would you help me welcome Chad Davis to the stage tonight?
All right, thank y'all. He said, my name is Chad. I'm a faithful believer in Jesus Christ. And throughout my life, I've struggled with alcoholism, drug addiction, steroid abuse, sex addiction, pornography, anger, violence, greed, selfishness, just about every other sin you can think of. I've not proudly, but I've done just about all of them. One thing I'll do real quick, I'm just going to start with a quick prayer before I get going. God, I just want to thank you for this time, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to come up here and speak and tell my story of what you've done in my life. And I pray the words that come out of my mouth are not from me, but from you. And I hope that even if it helps one person in here with any kind of seed planted, it'll reach somebody. In Jesus' name, amen. If you haven't noticed, probably going to cry getting through this. So you've never seen a 250-pound biker cry, you're about to. I sometimes make it through these without crying, but then my wife was coming, so I figured that wasn't going to happen. And then my daughter just showed up right as it's about to start, so I was like, there's no chance this is not going to happen. All right, quick backstory. I was born pretty much in here down the street. Lived in Woodstock all my life. Went to Woodstock High School. Never really lived anywhere other than here. I had a really great childhood up until about the age of 12 or 13. We were heavily invested in church, Sunday schools, Wednesday night services, all of those things. And, it was, and I'm glad that I had that more so, not that everybody shouldn't have that, but if I hadn't had that as a kid, there is no chance. Well, sorry, I don't want to limit God, but I don't think I would be here today. It was that, that teaching and stuff that I got as a kid that put that in my heart to where I always knew God existed, and I never doubted that. And I thank my parents, because if they hadn't given me that, I don't know if I'd still be alive today. But, so at the age of about, I think I was 13, 14, my parents started having problems. They got divorced, and they're both great, love them to death. They didn't do anything wrong. They just both had to work, multiple jobs, to make ends meet, when they had their own hurts they're trying to deal with and trying to date again, so I don't blame them for anything. But what it did leave is a spot in my, I went from a perfect childhood and a family to nothing. So in that time frame, that short period of time, it kind of, I didn't know where to turn to. So, I just started hanging out with people that would, and I didn't really care what they were doing. And it started off small. It started off as, it was, we were all young, but they get some of their parents' beer. We'd have a couple beers. I didn't think it was any big deal. And that's where I got tricked by the devil into thinking that these little things don't matter that much. But all it was there was a line that I kept barely stepping over. I never thought, if when I was a teenager, if you gave me the list of things that I ended up doing, I'd have thought there's no way that's ever going to be me. I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm not going to do any of those things. sorry, my ADD is so bad that I can be good, then I'll jump around. But anyway, so it started off simple enough, just drinking a little bit here and there. After a while, then I would smoke a little bit, and that slowly became more and more, to where then by the time I was, I don't know, 18 to 21, somewhere in there, I was pretty much a binge alcoholic. I could not drink during the week, but from Friday to Sunday, I was drinking constantly. That's all my life really revolved around, for the most part. We'll say in that time frame, I met my wife whenever I was 16. We got married when I was, 23, 24. Don't kill me. So, I have 3 great kids. There are some good things I did in this time frame, but I use that as a way to justify my drinking. Is like I still, I put a roof over my kids' heads. I go to work. I do all the things a man's supposed to do. But during the weekends, I would just go crazy. And that slowly got to be more and more things. To drug use, I don't like saying this, especially with my daughter here, but other women. I would chase money. I chased drugs. I chased alcohol. I chased everything of this world that I could think of. I chased it with, when I started making money, to buying things, thinking that would make me happy, that would fill the void in my heart. I followed that, that path for a long time. I was a very violent person, especially on my weekend benders were on top of the cocaine and the alcohol and whatever else may be involved. My sole point was to find somebody to fight that weekend. I don't know how I didn't end up in prison sooner than I did. I got lucky in that aspect. There's a couple times I got charged with things that looking back, I wish I hadn't gotten away with, because it only made me feel even more invincible. I think the best way to say this, it made me feel like I couldn't get caught, because I got away with pretty much everything that I did. Part of it is I was a really good liar, really good manipulator. I could twist stories. So even when the cops got me, I could always find a way to make it seem like I had no part in it. Getting other people to say it was somebody else's fault. I could lie with the best of them. And I could do that through all aspects of my life. I manipulated just about everybody. Didn't care about lying. I didn't care. None of it really fazed me for a long time. It was just something to get whatever I wanted. If I got whatever I wanted out of it, I didn't care what I told you. It didn't matter to me. Now, while I still had that belief in God through all this time, I stuffed him way down at the bottom of the list. My relationship with him pretty much didn't exist. It was just I know you're there, and I get mad, why are you making me feel guilty about the things that I'm doing? I never liked that part. I understand it a lot more now, but I didn't like it much then. Let's see here. Let's go over this a little bit. But my drinking and drug use got really bad I'll start with this. That pretty much pattern was constant up through until till I was about 30 years old. And it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as it was going to get. It didn't really get bad, and this is going to be the hard part.
You got this, Chad. You got it.
All right, it didn't really get bad until my son was born. Well, I was about 28 at the time, but I won't get into a list of his health issues, but he spent the first I won't say first 2 years, but probably 75% of the first 2 years of his life in a NICU room. I could spend an hour up here talking about all the different things he was in there for. But I didn't know how to deal with that because the way I was raised as a man is you don't cry, you don't talk about your emotions, you stuff it down and you just deal with it. And I do believe there's a time for that in a way. Like there's a time when I need to be strong for my wife or strong for my other two kids that has its place. My problem was I didn't know where that place was. The only thing I knew was men don't cry. And men don't show emotion, and men don't talk about their problems. So, but we're not made that way, so it's going to come out in some other way. Yeah. And so that just turned my already bad addiction problems into something a whole lot worse, to the point where I started drinking more, doing more drugs. I was in powerlifting at the time, so my steroid abuse went through the roof because I just used that as an outlet to go lift and do competitions. And, there's the damage I did to my body through, the mixture of all those things. It's caught up with me now physically. It'll probably get worse as I go on. But I used everything possible so that I wouldn't have to actually feel anything. Because the thought of having to actually feel anything that he was, that I didn't know how to deal with seeing my son in a hospital bed and not being able to do anything about it, I couldn't stand. Because that's one thing as a man is I don't like to not be able to fix a problem. So when I have a problem like that I can't fix, I had no clue what to do. Because it's the most helpless feeling I've ever had in my entire life. Oh, sorry. All right. And the crazy thing is, I saw God actually saw him perform a miracle on my son whenever he was told that his kidneys were failing, that they couldn't give him dialysis, they couldn't do kidney transplant because he was too young for all of that and too small and just too, physically vulnerable to undergo any kind of surgery. And we were told that if his kidneys didn't start working, I can't remember what it was, the next 12 hours, 24 hours, something like that, he wasn't going to make it. The worst part of it is, I won't say the worst part, but the part that I struggled with, the shame for a long time, was that I was drunk whenever I got the call. I drank another 12-pack on the way down to the hospital. My best friend Clay had showed up there. Okay, and prayed over him with me, which I didn't want to do because I was drunk and he knew I was, but he told me we were going to do it anyway. His kidney started working, I don't know, within the next hour after that. Oh, and there's more to that with that friend I'll get to a little bit later. But I still continued down that, even seeing that happen. Instead of seeing the miracle that God performed in saving his life when doctors said there was no hope for him, I just got more angry with him. Because I was angry at the fact that he was there in that hospital bed, not me. Because I didn't care what God did to me. It didn't matter to me. I didn't care if I lived. I didn't care about none of that. And even if I had cared at that point, like any parent, you'd still swap with them any chance you could. And I just couldn't at the time understand why God would let that happen to a little baby. And I understand things a lot differently now, but at the time I couldn't wrap my head around that. And it took me a while to get to that point where I could understand it's not of God. That's the sin in the world, and that's where God can use that and turn that to His glory if you'll let Him and you'll actually give things to Him. But it took me a long time to realize that. I just saw my son there and was just mad at God. And I saw little things like this that he did where my son probably shouldn't have made it. Things that were his surgery on his throat that they had to do. Again, I won't get into details, but the doctor published a paper on it because of how just little things like that constantly happening that I couldn't see. I just blew right by them, and I just stayed angry, which was always my go-to my whole life. When I don't understand something, I'm mad. And anger is one of my biggest ones. So fast forward, my drug use and drinking got a lot worse, and everything I did got a lot worse for a few years. But like a lot of people, you can only do things for so long before you get caught. And I eventually ended up getting caught and doing a year in prison. Had a couple, I'll give one other occasion where, God saved me and I should have realized this. I had gone to it was Callahan's golf course up off 140. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I had done God knows what. I'll just say this, I wasn't sober. But I went there solely with a purpose to shoot myself. My wife and I were separated at the time. But when I had the kids with me that weekend, they had left their iPad in my truck, which they had never done before. And my wife, for some reason, knew that she needed to find where I was at. So she was able to find my iPad or whatever you want to call it, to find my iPhone thing, and locate where I was, and come there to stop. Again, it was one of the things. They had never left an iPad in my truck. I don't even think we mean to turn the Find My thing on. She just started looking for ways to find me because she knew I wasn't okay. So it's just another instance where God provided, say, a miracle, but I couldn't see it that way. I could only see the things that I wanted to see. I wasn't seeing what, the work that He was doing. So I'll go back to, I spent a year in prison. Probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Nobody ever really enjoys going to prison, and I won't say I enjoyed it. But it was the adult timeout that I needed. But funny enough, it still didn't completely do the trick. It got me to read my Bible again, and I don't know anybody who's ever been locked up before. It's called a jailhouse Jesus. You find Him when you're in there, but when you get out, it's easy to go right back into doing the things you thought you wouldn't do again. Well, I did. Started drinking again a little bit. Then started doing coke again and going back down the same road I went in. And then the last night that I ever drank was actually I call her my sister. She's like my sister, but it was her wedding. I got in a fight with that. I got drunk, me and that same friend, the one that prayed over my son, got into a fight. I got in my truck, left. They had their wedding up on top of this mountainside, and it was raining. I couldn't see very well. Drove off the side of the cliff. The only thing that stopped my truck from tumbling down about a 150-yard, kind of drop off was a tree probably no bigger than my forearm. And it hit in the perfect spot on my truck that if it hit any further back or any farther forward, my truck would have just spun around and gone down the hill. That one finally did it. I finally saw that one. So 2 days later, I found an AA, started going there. I found a sponsor in there, and I started doing all of the things that he said to do. And there's a part of me too that, I knew I needed to do something, but I will say at the beginning, I didn't really believe that any kind of program would really work. I knew I had to stop, and I knew I couldn't keep drinking. But the fact of me actually needing somebody else, I couldn't. I don't work that way. I don't need help. Other people need help. I don't need it. But partly I went because I promised everybody I would go, and I promised them I would give it everything I got. And if I say I'm going to do something, I'll at least follow through with that. So when I told people I'll give it everything I had, I put aside the fact of I don't think this will work. And I said, well, at least at the end of this, I can sit back and look and say, I told y'all this wouldn't work. And I can say it honestly, and, then they couldn't bother me anymore about going. Well, it didn't really work out that way. So, it was actually, when I said my sponsor and some other friends I found, I actually ended up joining up, and I was a member of this for a few years. It's called ARM, but it's Association of Recovering Motorcyclists. It's basically a biker group for alcoholics. Not your 1% biker type. All we did was travel around the country, just trying to help other people get sober, doing events. I believe it's actually the largest sober organization in the world, outside of like AA and CR and those kind of things, but like actual group. I think there's like 5,000 something members across the world. But I did that for a while. But in that time frame, like I said, it's the program and actually letting people help you actually does work. You're not going to be able to do anything on your own. And I didn't think that I was like everybody else. I didn't think that was really possible. But I came to find out that there's not a way to do it by yourself. I've never seen that work. I've seen a lot of people get sober, and I've seen a lot more try. Every single person that's tried it by themselves has failed miserably. You can white knuckle it for a little while. You may be able to get through 3 or 4 years of it. But all that's going to happen is you'll be miserable and sober. You won't be, or I won't use the term sober, you'll be miserable and clean. Because if you don't actually work the steps and actually implement those in your life and actually put God in your life, nothing's, just being clean defeats the purpose. It's a mind problem that we have. It's not just like we drink because of the mind problem, or do drugs because of that. Because we're trying to, whether it's fill an emptiness inside or our way of thinking is all, jacked up. We don't, it's not just that we can't, it's not just the alcohol. The alcohol is just a byproduct of our issue. But then, and nobody promises, if anything, the Bible says your life will probably be harder, when you turn over your life over to Jesus. Same thing can happen when you get sober. I thought my life would be perfect and, all these things once I finally got rid of the substance stuff. Doesn't really work that way. Because actually, other than the issues with my son, my life actually I hit the hardest points actually in sobriety than what I thought was hard before. About a month after I was sober for a year, my mom died suddenly. Her boyfriend talked her into trying a drug she had never done. She never was a drug person. And it gave her a heart attack. So it was, if I hadn't been sober and had God in my life in that time, there's no telling what I would have done. Because I sure wanted to. But that's the part where you can't do it on your own. That I had other men and people there that I had surrounded myself with in that time frame that I could lean on during that time. And that one hit me really hard because my mom was, other than my wife and 2 other friends, there was nobody else, that stuck with me with everything I was going through. And I honestly can't blame the people that didn't stay around me because I wasn't really deserving of that. But my mom was, like she was an angel. because she never cared about what I did. Like, none of that stuff mattered to her. I mean, she wasn't thrilled with it, but she didn't judge me for it. She never talked about it. She never any of those things. So losing her was not easy. It's still not easy, and that's, you're going on 6 years now. But then that same friend that, I prayed over my son, at that time, alcohol hadn't gotten him. He drank some, a little bit, but over the years in between that, he became a bad alcoholic also. And I could go into a lot about that, but I won't do too much. And I tried to get him into, the rooms and to get help and I thought I was prideful. But long story short, 1 year, the anniversary of my mom dying, he shot himself. Man, that one, I never can get through talking about that one. Because he wasn't my brother, but he's as much my brother as you could possibly be. He's the only person I probably talk to him every day of my entire life. He just, I tell that story now so that people will, just to hope that somebody will realize that it can't be done on your own, because that's what he tried to do. He said he couldn't let go, and it took me a long time, and I'm very prideful, so it was very hard for me, but he never could let go of that. He just, he held on to that, and I just try to use that now as if there's anybody on this planet that could have done it by themselves, it would have been him. He was the most headstrong person I'd ever known. He's cop, SWAT sergeant, most people didn't believe that it was really him that did that, because he kept it as nobody else saw it. But if it's possible for somebody to do it on their own, he could have done it. Anyway, I could go on about that, but I won't do that. That one took me a while. And I think the combination of both my mom and him, so close together, that one took me a while to get through, because I still had this thing where it's hard for me, and I still struggle. It's still hard for me to talk about things I feel, or, to show emotion and those kind of things. Some of those things that were planted in me as a kid are not always easy to get rid of. But now, like everything that I do now, I try to do it, let me reword this. God's will for each day in my life is all I really care about anymore. There's nothing else that matters to me at that level. My kids matter, my wife matters, all of those things, but not to that level. Whatever his will for me is that day, and whatever he wants for me to do is the only thing I really care about. And there's one Bible verse, and I actually got it, all my tattoos, I only got 2 prison ones, but one of them actually is a verse and I got it on my hand so I don't ever forget to look at it, but it's Proverbs 14:12, and it's in there at Proverbs 16 something. I remember asking the preacher, why is it in here twice? He's like, well, the Bible says it twice. It might be kind of important. But the verse is, and I'll jack it up, but of course, there's 40 different translations, so maybe I'll guess one of them right. But it's, oh God, money. Now I'm having a squirrel moment. There is a way that seems right to a man, but it ends in death. It's everything that I thought I needed to do with my life and how I thought I needed to live it just ends in death. It ended up in a prison cell, and it would have led to death if I hadn't stopped. But, you know, I don't, I don't need any proof that God exists. Even though I've seen him, I've seen things that couldn't be, you know, like him healing my son. It's all that stuff. Like, but those aren't really why I really know that he's there. I know he's there because there's no way that makes sense that you can take a man like the one that I was and to change, like to completely like flip my soul around, like and to change into being, you know, who I am today. The person that I was would never cared about anybody. Didn't care who I hurt. Didn't care what I had to do to get what I wanted. I was evil. I was violent. I was mean. I was convinced that I was a psychopath, you know, sociopathic, all the narcissistic, like, and I probably was. You know, a doctor, if they sat down with me, would have diagnosed me of probably every single one of those. But I know God exists because he took all of those. Like, the way psychologists and doctors and all this, like, they just consider it you're born this way. Like, you're born sociopathic, psychotic, all those things. I don't really believe that anymore. Because if that was the truth, I'd still be one. Because a man like I was isn't supposed to do things like this, isn't supposed to be able to, I mean, I'm a 13-time felon, violent person, all these things. Like, they shouldn't let me in a school to, you know, to tell little kids about Jesus and lift weights for them. Like, it just, like, I don't need anything else to convince me that God exists. Even though I see all the things, I understand you know, how complicated the universe and the world is, and you know, that can't be just natural. That's got to be, you know, that's created by someone. Like, and I can see that and I understand all that, but that's not why I know he's there. I know he's there because, yes, science can explain a lot of things, but it can't explain someone's soul changing. If it wasn't for my relationship with Jesus, there's no chance that I would be here in any form or fashion. And the last thing I'll say is there's a whole list of things that I could write down, and I could write 50 pages of things that I am, you know, alcoholic, drug addict, all of that. And that's what, you know, there may be some people from my past that still label me as those things. There may be some people that even, you know, have a problem in my past that label me as those things. But I'm not those things anymore. The only thing that matters is the one on the other column. Like I said, I get 50 pages over here. I got the one item on this column, and it's the only one that matters, and that's that I'm his. But anyway, thank y'all.